What if the movement of any game character could be done entirely by an AI you control?
The character starts to move left. When I press right, the character moves right. When I increase the speed, you'll see the character start to move. Our inference speed here is 50 milliseconds. And as a result, you get motion that looks like you would if you were using a tool or system like motion matching in a game.
That is Viren Tellis, the CEO of Uthana, a generative AI startup focused on motion.
Our vision is that characters will come to life in real time, in response to the environment, in response to the narration, in response to the intent of the character. We believe that's going to happen, and that's going to be powered by our technology.
These episodes dive into how Uthana is changing the way motion is generated.
There are 4 ways that we have built to generate motion.
He shares how AI motions open up workflows that once required expensive mocap setups, now accessible to anyone.
If you're not an animator, the idea of getting into animation can seem like such a hurdle. Text to motion and video to motion sound amazing, but I think an expert's going to love our motion in-betweening with world control. That's the kind of stuff that they are doing anyways. They want to do it faster.
We look at what data are used to train these AI models.
We've partnered with a motion capture studio that specifically filming for us and for AI training purposes.
And we discuss the impact of AI on the future of interactive experiences.
It's going to fundamentally change the way that games are built. Today, if you want to make a high fidelity game, you need a significant animation budget. In the future, that won't be the case. You won't even have to have an understanding of animation per se to be able to leverage the tools that are coming off the shelf. The types of games will be different, but also the number of games will be different, not just because of us, because of almost all these AI tools.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor Meshi, who made this episode possible. Meshi is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality stylized 3D model in just a minute. Some of the recent feature updates include a new model with improved mesh and hard surfaces, the ability to input multi-view image for increased control on the output, and a brand new workspace where you can assemble your own scenes and use that as a prompt for video generation. Go to Meshi AI and try it out now. And now it's time to roll the title and welcome Viren under the spotlight. Viren, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you and great to spend time with your audience.
I had the chance to test and experiment with Uthana already, and I think it is much more than just your AI mocap tool from video. So what are the ways in which you can generate motion in Uthana?
Good question. Yeah, there are 4 ways that we have built to generate motion. So the first is, as you mentioned, there's video to motion. So I upload a video and get an animation back. The second is text to motion, where you can actually just type in a prompt, and within 2 to 7 seconds, you'll have your character moving on the screen. The third is what we call motion stitching, the idea that you have multiple motions that need to combine into a single one. And we want to make the in-between portion that combines those two generative and take away the work of having to manually combine these two. And then the fourth is what we call our real-time products. And this allows you to direct a virtual character, whether that be in locomotion or eventually through voice, and the character will, in real time, respond to what you're doing. So these are the 4 ways that we are generating motion with Uthana.
So I wanted to ask you a question, but now I change immediately my mind, because the first thing is like, what are people using the most at the moment?
Yeah, good question. So when we look at the way that motion is downloaded from our website, we actually see a pretty decent split between the video to motion and the text to motion. The motion in betweening is our third, because only certain people need to go into that editing phase of combining things. And the real-time products have just come out recently. So it's number 4, but I think in the future, it'll become one of the biggest ones.
Okay, fair. So let's start maybe with the video to motion, right? One of the things that is always like important, of course, to people is how precise, let's say, the quality of that translation of the video into this 3D character. What are basically the parameters that you use even yourself internally to evaluate if the tool is improving? Are we talking about foot locking? Are we talking about jitteriness? Is there something objective that we could look at to help assess the quality of these animations?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, for us, there's maybe 3 or 4 things that come to mind. So one is foot to hitting the ground correctly. So that's a obviously important one. And we think about that not just for video to motion, but all our products. Number 2 is fingers. Can the fingers be captured well? Because a lot of the story is told through the fingers. And we actually just released this functionality, I think last week or week before on Uthana. So this is a pretty big upgrade for us. Number 3 would be, having no jitter, having no broken motion, something that's just completely unrealistic. So that's an obvious one. And then maybe 4th and final for us, which is not necessarily specific to the video uploaded, is, but how did that motion then get put onto your character specifically? Everything in Uthana is based around the character. And so you can upload your character at the beginning, and every single piece of the motion I talked about, where I'm talking the 4 different ways you can create Uthana, you actually see it on your character on the screen. And that's an important piece too, to make sure that folks get understanding of what it's going to look like on their character and not just generic motion in a default character.
I have so many questions. I mean, so you're saying basically that if I'm uploading an orc or a ballerina and I have a motion, that motion specifically either is captured from, let's say, a video, or it's typed as text. That means that it's going to fit that specific body proportions. Is that really how it looks?
Yeah. So there's a couple dimensions of that. And I think we're at level 1. Level 1 would be, can the motion be retargeted to that character in a cohesive and normal way where I'd be like, yeah, that's my emotion on that character. And yes, we do that today. A secondary would be, can I make it such that there are 0 interpenetrations when I get that retarget? And that needs to be mesh aware. We're going to be working on that soon. And then the third thing, which is probably like the holy grail, which we don't do yet, but we are working towards, is, can I understand the character and therefore the style of that character and modify the animation in a way that captures the style or essence of the character? That's where we're headed, right? We want to make sure that motion is applied to your character in a real way. We're at the level 1, but we're working towards the 3rd level.
So we were talking also about text to motion, right? And how does that, in a sense, because motion is incredibly hard to control, right? So if in any way, right, nowadays, right, when you're talking about video, we know that it's incredibly hard. And if I'm asking for swimming, I could swim in so many ways, right? If I'm asking about jumping, I could jump in so many ways. So maybe the point is that the kind of input is also dependent on the type of output, in a sense, like how particular am I in the need of this jumping animation to look in a specific way. So I don't think that we can look at control only as a control, but it depends on the application that specific motion at the end, let's say, how it gets used. Can you make this parallel? So how are people using this text to motion, and how can they prompt in a way to get what they want?
Yeah, great question. So in our system, it's natural language prompting. And you can prompt generically, give me a jump, or you can prompt with more specificity, give me a large jump, give me a small jump with hands in the air, give me a jump with a 180-degree turn. So you can continue to add in more detail. We get at some point to a place, though, where the level of detail you're adding would define it as a performance as opposed to an action. And when you get to performance, you get to the place where maybe video to motion was the better solution in the first place, right? So I think there's this line between I need an action versus I need a performance. And at some point you say there's a better tool for this, and that might be video to motion. But if we're thinking about use cases such as previs, we're thinking about things that might be indie quality versus AA quality and not AAA quality for an action, or we have just some type of animation I want to work with in Blender or Maya, but I just need a starting spot. These are all really good places for text to motion, where literally in under a minute, you could have your character moving in a, directionally way of where you want it to be.
I just wanted to have a quick break to let you know that if you enjoy the topic of AI tools for motion, I've put together a comprehensive list of 12 apps I personally tested that turn video into a 3D animation. You can get it right now by subscribing to the XR Spotlight newsletters, where I share weekly interviews like this one with founders and creatives at the intersection between XR and AI. Just check out the first link in the episode description. And now, let's get back to the show. You started mentioning tools, and that's, I think, about the obvious next step. So let's imagine that, we are going to talk about the generative motion, let's say in real time later, because I think it's a super fascinating topic, right? But first, I would like to also exhaust these one at least that we have discussed, being, of course, the video to motion, the text to motion, and then maybe the stitching if needed, I can imagine, right? Now, what happens afterward, right? What do I get out of Uthana? How can I use it? And are there other ways in which this workflow can be complemented with professional tools?
Sure. Yeah. So right now, the journey starts either through that first prompt of text to motion, or it could start by uploading the character. So again, as I mentioned, you can see your character doing the motions on the screen. After you see your animation on the screen and you like it, post maybe trimming or adjusting the arms up and down, which are some of the tools we have in our platform. You can download that to FBX or GLB, and it's now on your character.
A question. So are you saying that I can make changes to that animation within the web tool? So I could, for example, change some keyframe. Is that what I can do?
That's right. Yes. So there are some basic changes you can do, and then there are some more complex ones. So the basic changes would be arm adjustments, or looping, or trimming. And so those are 3 ones you could kind of find right on our text to motion page. The more advanced ones would be like stitching. And so today our stitching is take 2 animations, combine them, and add in betweens. But where we're going, actually, it's going to come out later this week, is our motion stitching V2, where you can actually scrub the timeline to the exact keyframe you want, then add another animation to the exact keyframe you want, and then in between them as well, and position them in world space. So when you have control to position your animations in world space, you can actually get the exact, quote unquote performance you want. It's getting that a little bit more control. It still begs the question, at what point would I have been better off just doing a video to motion? But certain animations, maybe you can't perform at home, or you already have some basis you will start from. There are reasons why a stitching tool like that would be very valuable.
I still want to go to the tool things because we haven't touched it yet. But there is a question that I have, in a sense, like motion is sometimes very tied to the environment, right? So there is a very big difference. If I want to make 4 steps, 5 steps, I need to bend to grab something, right? And that is a certain height. And maybe that environment doesn't even exist in the real world. So I cannot even use a video. So how do you go about arranging those motions in a 3D space in a way that might fit whatever is, for example, your final purpose? If I want to walk, maybe open a window and lean out the window, like a simple animation from an NPC character, for example.
Yeah.
I would need some reference. Am I just too far ahead?
You're not that far ahead. You're maybe just a month or so ahead, where we do have a suite of API tools that lets all our the real-time aside, all our other generations be done via API. So then you can embed this into your system. So we have platforms that are kind of AI first game platforms that are working with us, and they empower their users to create and through our APIs. The next step for us is actually to build plugins into tools like Blender and Maya that will use the same generative functionality, but in those tools. That way, for the example you gave, you can have your scene, and then you can actually position your character within the scene and then create the generation. So that's going to be really what you need in order to visualize what does it look like with my character in my scene when I start to create motion.
And this is also another very interesting point, because there are a lot of these generative AI tools that, of course, starts with this web-based interface, right? That allows to do, let's say, almost experience what this is really about, right? And how efficient, if it works, if it responds to the user's input. But on the other hand, I think that the future of this tool will be kind of like embedded in the tools that are for the creatives, whatever you're doing, right? Even if you're talking about image to motion, it needs to exist in something like DaVinci or Premiere or the place where people do the editing, because otherwise it will always be broken.
That's right.
What is your thoughts about these integrations? Because I think that maybe we are just early, right? And so there aren't that refined integration on the market. And I'm talking about motion, but more in general about Gen AI tools.
Yeah, I think it's a natural evolution. So when we started by building within our own web app for a couple of reasons. But the primary one was that it was the fastest feedback loop with the user as to whether this thing was working or not, whether the generation was good. And it was something that we could also visually see exactly the same thing they were seeing. When we go into a world where we're going through plugins, through APIs, we can no longer see what the user is seeing. And we're relying on that feedback. And that feedback loop is also delayed or sometimes not possible because maybe a version of the plugin has changed, or we don't have connectivity or connection with that user. We don't even have a user's email, perhaps, depending on how it was integrated. So we want to keep that generation close. And I think you're seeing this not just in the motion, you're seeing this in the 2D, 3D asset space. You probably see this in other areas as well. Now, as we develop, I think more and more companies will have to decide, are they a technology or are they a platform? And for us, we are a technology, and we are empowering platforms to do what they want to do. And so we'll be trying to embed our technology into those platforms. And that's the natural evolution, I think, at least for us.
So you mentioned a few things, right? One with this integration with existing platform as a technology. I do imagine also that, of course, there are professionals using Uthana to create some of their animation. So can you maybe give us some tangible example about what people are creating and how they're using them? Maybe in one case and maybe in the other one when you just directly integrate into a bigger platform, so to say.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you maybe 3 examples. So one of them was an indie game dev who is working at a AAA studio, but he's building his own content on the side. He uploaded a couple characters, built out animations for each character, and then brought that back into Unreal, where he was building his indie game, and created an entire playable using those animations. So that's just one example of how you can create with us, since piece by piece, pull it into your scene. Another is a TikTok creator who puts out content on a weekly basis, and he has his own kind of persona, his own character. So he's uploaded that character, and now he continually prompts and he gets to see it on that character. And then he makes modifications in a tool like Blender after the fact, but he starts with Uthana because it accelerates him so much. And then a third is a new platform that is building game creation in the web browser. And so they've integrated our API so that the user can create their own character. They go out to some 2D to 3D asset model. Then they prompt us to get the character moving. They can cache that. And now that character becomes, alive in this new virtual world in the web, within minutes, because of the power of AI, not just ours, but other AI as well.
I don't know if you can, but I know that my audience always goes to the depth in a sense. Can you share the name of that platform?
Yeah, I think I can, because I'm sure they would love the attention. It's called Nilo, Nilo.
I think I subscribed the other day to the beta. I need to reach out. It says, hey, I interviewed the guys from
They're just coming into a beta, and I think they have a wait list. So, join early, join the wait list. I'm sure Nuno, the CEO, would appreciate it.
I'm one of them. Eventually, maybe I will get access as well. But yeah, so now I do believe, though, that you made 3 examples that are 3 very different use cases for very different people. Right. And surprisingly, I think that there wasn't an animator in all of them. And that's an interesting point, I think, to think about. I'm sure that there are
many animators use this as well.
I have no doubt. Yeah. But what's the weight, in the sense that how many people that they have close to very little knowledge about animation end up using a tool like this that at the end it's kind of still meant for professionals? Right. I mean,
yeah. So I think it depends on the use cases. I think where animators are using us is through something like video to motion, where they want some reference, and they're familiar with the process of creating reference video, even if it's not using AI, but it's just like, here's the performance I want to capture. And now I'm going to start to, keyframe to match that performance. The text to motion, I would say, doesn't normally appease or placate what an animator wants, because they have a vision that's kind of beyond maybe the basic text to motion. Whereas if you're not an animator, the idea of getting into animation can seem like such a hurdle that text to motion and video to motion sound amazing. It's like, oh my gosh, I got my character moving. This is amazing. Like I didn't have to do anything. Like that's a promise of AI in some ways. But we think that AI can be used for both groups, for novices as well as experts. And we just have to build the right tools for those different groups. So while a novice might like text to motion, I think an expert's going to love our motion in betweening with role control, where I can position it exactly where I want and get the exact keyframe alignment. That's the kind of stuff that they are doing anyways. If they want to do it faster, if they don't have to start from scratch between all those keyframes, they can start with an AI solution. I think that accelerates them. And ultimately, that's really what, animators want. They want to go faster.
There is always one thing that these tools are very versatile, right? And they tend to kind of like branch out in doing different things. There are even just 3D Gen AI tools, right? That create a character, then they rig it, and then, hey, you can add an animation to it. And you right now said, well, we have something for animators. We have something for indie game developers that now can create their things. And then we have something for content creators, because that's what it is. Yeah. Now, isn't that risky? Because every time I see this Gen AI tool that they are branching out in gazillion of applications, and from the time of this old SaaS software specializing, I just like, what is your take on this kind of like approach that I think it's a Gen AI approach overall, where we see like more features being added and getting broader and more capable with use cases that maybe do not fit a specific user persona?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a strategy question, and it comes down to what type of company are you? If you are an application company or an AI company leveraging foundation models, then I think being narrow, following and listening to your customer very specifically and not going wide is important, because you need to solve someone's problem specifically. But we are not an application company. We are a foundation model company. The best way to think about Uthana is foundation models for human movement. And we are like an LLM, where LLMs are predicting the next word in a sentence. We are predicting the next frame of movement. We can condition that prediction with text or 2D video or game input, but ultimately we're a foundation model. And foundation models, as we've seen in other industries, benefit from going wide. And we benefit from leveraging the distribution of our customers, whether those be platforms or individuals or whatever it might be. So I think that's why for us, you're going to see us go wide in terms of use cases rather than going narrow. We still have to make trade-offs and decisions about like, should we, focus on this type of movement, which is like more game specific, than this type of movement, which might be more dance specific or more VFS specific. So there are trade-offs that we have to make still. But ultimately at the core, we are a foundation model.
So before going into this real-time motion generation, right, there is also one thing, because I don't think we have mentioned that it's also about your library of motions, right? So it's not just about this generated by text, but also something that is just a library from which you can pick.
Yes.
So more broadly, right, all these data, how do you train these models, right, to either generate this library of motion or maybe analyze the video that a user might submit? Where do you get all these data? Because that is also often one of the concern from the creatives. It says, okay, yes, it's AI, so yep, nothing belongs to me. Or is this the case?
Yeah. So when you create a foundation model company, data is very important. And so we've partnered with a motion capture studio that typically films for AAA games and Hollywood movies, but they're specifically filming for us and for AI training purposes. And what that means is that we actually engage with the actors that are doing the filming and have them agree to film for AI training. That allows all the outputs of Uthana to be able to use commercially if you have a commercial license agreement with us. And we want to make sure that we are not infringing upon someone's animation or movement or motion. And we've taken very important steps to make sure that's not happening. The library, as a result, is actually pieces of that filming. And we direct that filming. So when we see users prompt things that we don't have, we can go and film more of that motion and add it to the library. That's a special perk of using Uthana.com. We're not going to make that library available anywhere else. It's only available at Uthana. But from that, we can train models to learn motion and predict what animation should be based on some signal or text, and we'll make those models available, beyond Uthana.com.
I do have a question, more like, because this might be a stupid question, but please bear with me, okay? It's like, when it's about impossible movements, right? In a sense, like Spider-Man, or like these things that are not really human, right? That you cannot just record. How does your model behave? And is that something that can be fixed somehow?
Yeah, so today I say our model would not do particularly well with unrealistic movement. We are improving that, and I have unique ways in which we're going to do it that I won't share exactly. But we are working on getting non-humanistic movement to also be added to the model. And we also, again, have to take care that we do that in the appropriate ways to respect creators. And we're not going to be, just stealing from existing animations that live out there somewhere. But this is an area where I don't think we're the number one place, because our foundation model right now is for human motion. And we really focus on bipedal characters. We focus on the way that humans move. And we are thinking about how do we capture that in studios or in motion capture studios and then bring that through the entire pipeline.
Yeah, because if you start thinking about aliens or quadrupeds or other kind of like that thing gets really messy.
Yeah. And to the point, like, I think it's important for our audience to know that we do all bipedal characters. As long as your character has 2 arms and 2 legs and has a skeleton, we can get that character moving. It doesn't matter how many spine joints it has. Doesn't matter the length of the bones. Doesn't matter if they're named kind of weird. Like, you can upload this character, and we've already figured out the way to retarget our animation onto any other character. But if you're doing quadrupeds, if you're doing some other like blob or some ghost or something, like, that's not, real focus on that.
We have mentioned several times real-time motion generation with AI. Can you explain us what is that and what's the nuance? Because it might seem very simple from text to motion, but that's not, right? So can you please unpack it for us?
Sure. So it's not very different from text to motion in that we are still making a prediction about what those next frames are. However, in the real-time sense, we're doing that prediction very, very fast. Our inference speed here is 50 milliseconds. And so when you're going at that speed, you can actually take as input not just text, but game controller. So, or WASD on the keyboard. And so now when I press left, the character starts to move left. When I press right, the character moves right. When I increase the speed, you'll see the character start to move, increase their velocity. If I decrease it, it'll start to decrease. And that's all happening because these predictions that we're making, we're just doing it over and over again, very, very fast. And as a result, you get motion that looks like you would if you were using a tool or a system like motion matching in a game. And we can also move towards where we'll actually take a voice input or a command, and the character will be able to be responsive to that command in fractions of a second. And so it'll feel like you're talking to someone or you're directing a virtual actor. And that's the promise, and that's where we want to head. There are trade-offs when you go that fast with quality, and that's what we're working through right now, is how do you get the quality of text to motion or video to motion with the speed of real time. But when we get there, it's going to fundamentally change the way you think about a character on the screen. Characters could be AI generated completely, when before it might have been animator created or human on the screen.
So when it comes to this, let's say, generated motion, how do you actually implement it? So is there something that you can plug into your experience? Now we're talking about games. We can keep talking games, but overall, right, the scope could be broader than that. Yes. I can imagine a simulation, for example, right? So where the characters maybe, now the response to external factor, that's another thing, right? Because it adds another layer of complexity. I can imagine like a wall or a step.
That's right.
But let's imagine the simplest case, right? To implement just that generative motion on a flat surface in a game that maybe runs on the web or maybe runs on a PC. How's that work? Yeah,
so we've built an SDK that houses the information coming from a model and then translate that to the experience that we're integrating with. So We built one for the web. We built one for Unreal. We'll be building one for Unity. We'll continue to do other engines. But once that's built, then the developer is going to integrate the SDK and then make calls to the SDK, which will then call back our model and send back frames in real time. And we can get that onto any character. So to your point about not just games, we are talking with avatar companion companies. We're talking to simulation companies, VR and AR. It's even applicable to the real world, like with robots, because all these are where there's a bipedal character, it's interactive, and they got real-time motion back. And that's essentially what Uthana is built for, is interactivity.
So does that come at a cost? In a sense, especially maybe for the web or in AR or on VR, where let's say there are constraints, right? Adding these models maybe to understand the space around that are calls, API calls, and the same thing I imagine for this, or not. So is there adds to the load that is, for example, happening? Can it happen, for example, on device at all?
Yeah, so it can happen to device. We've gotten the models small enough where they could technically run on device, but there are trade-offs between performance and cost between device and cloud. And so those are the things we're exploring with our early partners for their particular implementation, for the things they need. Do they need more locomotion or action? How many users do they have? How many characters on the screen at one time will be leveraging our technology versus other typical game engine motion technology. So these are all trade-offs that are messy to kind of go through over in this conversation, but those are the things we're having conversations with the end user. And with regards to scene awareness, we can take the traditional ways that games and XR, VR for that matter, like leverage scene and understand where the character is in the scene and use that to feed back to the model, because the model is constantly making a prediction on what the next frames are based on some history. And so the history was that it stopped at a wall. Now it's going to consider the fact that it stopped at the wall and make the next prediction. And so you can start to embed or understand, the scene itself via where the character is in remote space.
And so what are the things that it can handle in terms of, let's say, disturbances? I mean, for example, if there is wind coming maybe in one direction, or there is a ball thrown at it, are these things that can be predicted as well?
You could predict them, but I think the better way to think about it is there are physics systems and game systems that can be layered on top of our motion prediction that can modify the character. So for example, you could take a running motion from Uthana and you could layer on top a particular weapon that you have in your game. That's a simple one. But you could also layer on top it got hit. And so when you do that layering, the whole body has a new position, and we can take that understanding of where was the body at that moment and use that in our next prediction. And so there's this circular loop between what's happening in the game and what's happening in the model that allows us to have some understanding and continuity among the way the world works. And it's not all just Uthana's model. It's actually leveraging and borrowing from the existing engine. And I think that's an important thing, because it's not like we're different from these world models that are predicting every pixel on a screen. We're really focused on the motion piece. And so we're plugging into an existing environment, whether that be Godot or Unity, right? It's something that we have to partner and play with nicely.
So when we compare this way of generating motion, right, with the other one that we have mentioned before, where would you say you and Uthana is putting the most effort? Where do you see the most potential for, let's say, providing something that is unique, right, and that can stand the test of time, being implemented in workflows, in other tools?
Yeah. So our vision is that characters will come to life in real time, in response to the environment, in response to the narration, in response to the intent of the character, whether that be game-driven or user-driven. We believe that's going to happen, and that's going to be powered by our technology. But the path to get from here to there is going to take years as we improve these models. And as being nature of being a venture business, we need to make sure that we are making money along the way. We think from a financial perspective, the near-term opportunity of just empowering creators through text to motion, video to motion, or accelerating animators through motion stitching are the closest opportunities from a revenue perspective. However, I think these next ones, this real-time technology will be adopted very quickly, especially in like Avatar Companion world, where they've figured out how to bring the character to life through language, through facial reactions, through intent, but they're missing body motion. So it's not a question of like how, it's just a question of when.
You also, of course, mentioned that being venture-backed, having revenue, it's key, right? To show and also to validate that what you're building actually makes sense and adds value.
Yes.
How does that currently work? So you say that the majority maybe of this revenue coming from studios or creators or via this API deployment, or maybe some separate bigger project. Maybe just high level, how does the pricing works right now? And where do you see that there is actually the most interest?
Yeah. So right now we are in open beta on our web, which means creators can come and use our tools for free, unlimited generation. We do cap the number of downloads to 100 seconds per month. When we transition out of open beta, we will turn into a paid service that will also have a cap based on downloads, but not a cap on creations. We want to promote as much prompting as needed, as many characters as needed. When you find the motion for your character that's right, you'll hit download. And at that point, there will be some limits based on pricing. So right now, the way we're making most of our money is through our partners. And when we extend our tools via API to partners, then we have actual pricing in place. And so these are different types of pricing. Those are now going to be based on usage, because every prompt, of course, is something that they can then use in their game. So we have a usage-based system, and those are pricing deals that we only discuss on a partner-by-partner basis.
Viren, this has been an amazing conversation. I do have one more question, and that is regarding the way that we kind of like think about using this motion data that I use. So right now it's like, oh, I'm working like this and I want to generate motion and I want to implement and accelerate my own workflow, or maybe do something that I couldn't do because I don't have a mocap studio, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do believe that the moment that you can speak to a character and that character can move in real time, we are not just talking about accelerating workflow. We are talking about changing the way we design games, or adding new gameplay mechanic to these worlds that at
That's
the
right.
end has kind of like been the same for the past 30, 40 years, right? I mean, and controller input, and of course, there's been tremendous innovation, right? Also due to technology. When you move from 2D to 3D, huge, right? I don't think that we talk enough about the potential that Gen AI can have to create new emerging gameplay, not by generating assets within, oh, now I can create a box and I can put that box there. Oh, the polygons are not right and not the topology is bad. Maybe we are also like missing that opportunity and thinking about how Gen AI can create this emerging gameplay. What are your thoughts when it comes to emergent gameplays generated by AI and, let's say, motion?
Yeah, so we're seeing it with customers already that are integrating our text-to-motion API and embedding that into the gameplay itself. And it makes sense because the LLMs have powered new narratives, and the scene generation and the 2D, 3D asset generation is powering new environments. And so you'd want and expect the characters to also move in response to those new situations. The gameplay could be varied, right? It could be from just being more immersive in that it's responsive to the environment to actually some type of gameplay where your job is to control the character to do a certain thing in order to score points. Or those are very simple ways. I'm not the game developer here, but I do think that it's going to fundamentally change the way that games are built if a constraint is not the animation. Today, if you want to make a high fidelity game, you need a significant animation budget, animators, animation engineers. In the future, that won't be the case. You won't even have to have an understanding of animation per se to be able to leverage the tools that are coming off the shelf. And so the types of games will be different, but also the number of games will be different, not just because of us, because of almost all these AI tools. I think it's going to be fascinating to see all the different ways that games come about because of tools like Uthana.
There is also this, whenever I think about, now everybody can make a game, I also think about the threat in a way, where we're going to have so many of these games that is like a bit the AI slot version of games, right? And then it's like, okay, everybody's going to make games. And that's why I'm thinking instead about the new gameplay that revolves around that AI capability. For example, if it's a game that you never use a controller and where everything you do is just talking to the character and let them do things based on your voice, it's just a new game.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a new thing. And now here I'm thinking about the most basic thing, but imagine about the narrative. You can whisper to that person. Maybe you could, there is so many different things, right? You can suggest a talking line and that person could talk to that person back. There are so many opportunities, right? And that's what's, in a way, I like to believe that the future is not just about creating more content or creating it cheaper, but also using this tech also to enable new way to play games. Right. That is not just what we think today, because we haven't had the chance in being exposed to such technology and it's not working good enough to enable and unlock a full, let's say, gameplay opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that would actually pose even an additional dimension, which is that you might see that this gameplay doesn't come from what we think of as games today, but it comes from other experiences. Something that looks more like TikTok or something that looks more like VR chat, where those experiences start to integrate tools like Uthana and bring the characters to life in interactive ways. And then you say, well, now that the character's interactivity, what if I went on a quest or a mission or some type of goal with this character? Is that not a game in itself? And I think that's an interesting angle where we'll see, rather than saying, I'm going to go into Steam and find the next game that hacks, that one's using Uthana, like maybe, but I think we'll see these worlds collide as the tools bring us together.
Viren, thank you very much for your for sharing your knowledge, expertise, and what you guys are building. What can we expect from Uthana coming up in the next months?
Yeah, so this month expects us to see the motion stitching V2. So for animators, especially, I think you're going to like that. Following that, we're going to be extending our tools into APIs, and then the ability to control a character with your voice. You'll see that from us, hopefully by the end of the year, if not, January. So a lot of fun stuff coming up from us.
Exciting. Viren, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.